Thanks to everyone who braved the weather to make it today in the rain and so on. We're going to start with a presentation from Sonia, who's the artist who's done all the lovely work around you upstairs and downstairs. She's going to start off with telling about her journey as an artist to get till here and about her process in making this very exhibition. Following which, Sonia Ranjit Hoskote, cultural theorist and curator, and Gigi Scaria, visual artist. And I will sit down with Sonia and have a chat about how everyone's practices intersect and, you know, commonalities between work and writing and all those exciting things. So, enjoy.
Hi everyone, I'm Sonia Mehra Chawla and I'm delighted to be here today, and I would really like to thank Henna for making this happen, Ranjit and Gigi for taking out time from your busy schedule to be here with me and to support this. To tell you a little bit about myself, I work from Delhi, and I finished my BFA from the College of Art in 2001 in painting, and then subsequently my master's in painting itself in 2004. And somehow, I mean, although I majored in painting as a subject, I've always had a diverse range of interest in materials and in other mediums like printmaking, like video and photography. So I would say that my practice brings together and sort of assimilates all of these elements together and tries to tie them together through the content, really. So I have a set of slides and images for you today, selected ones, the ones that I feel are relevant to also to this particular exhibition and how you know, the work has sort of evolved and come up to this stage. So I will begin with the presentation. What you're looking at right now is a work in mixed media called Pod Womb, and it was it's a very early work. It was made in 2002. Now the reason why I've selected this this particular print to talk about is because this was a time where I was majoring in painting and I was struggling to keep my interest in printmaking alive. And during my master's time, I found that there are certain limitations, you know, when you're a student of painting in this country, and you know, you're not always allowed to use a lot of facilities from other departments, and that there are these constrictions and constraints. But I had support from Anupam Sood, with whom I have worked in the medium of etching for several years and have practiced under her. And following that, I would go regularly and practice at the Atelier 2221 Print and Edition Studio, which was opened by Devraj and Pratibha Dakoji in Shahpur Jat in Delhi. And this particular work is a work which is a variable print of a work which I did under the guidance of Anupam Sood in the etching studio in College of Art, which was called Womb. At this stage, I had started to experiment with aquatint etching, and also started to include other materials into the print, like Shinkole. So what you see here is a multiple print, which is then sort of printed onto a Nepalese rice paper and then run into the press. If I talk about the content of my work, I think the element of transformation is core to my practice. My practice brings together my experiences, my life experiences, and also sort of articulates various layers and fragilities through varied experiences. This is another work which was, this is a silk screen which has been done on wood. So it's a photographic silk screen. So the Atelier 2221 shut down a couple of years after I joined, and at that point I was finding it extremely difficult to sustain my practice in etching, and I started working in photographic silkscreen, And I was able to do that easily in my studio. And that's how I was keeping my interest in printmaking alive. This is the detail from Vortex. This is another work which was done at the Atelier. It's called Encapsulate. And the work itself, I mean, it shows layered processes. It shows silk screen, it shows etching, and layered shinkole. You can see the underlayers in the work. The detail from Encapsulate. Here's another detail. Okay, so this work is called Seed Formation, and it was a part of a show curated by Bhavna Kakkar in Bospacia called Reclaim, Recycle, and Recite. So here you can see the very pregnant forms and a metaphorical representation of the water symbol. This body of work was done in 2010, and it's called Some Roots Grow Upwards, and it talks about the transformative experience of the biological imperative. It talks about my personal meditations on the fragility and impermanence of life. It talks about my personal experiences of pregnancy and childbirth. And at this point I was reading a lot of Julia Kristeva as well, and I found a very common interest in concepts of motherhood and the whole practice. This is a detail from the work. I think motherhood is a life-changing experience for any woman, and by that I mean that we are looking at very dramatic transformations, whether those are physical, they are physiological, they're even psychological. And I think a mother is driven by the strongest intensity of drives, right from ideas of fear and angst, to extreme sense of passion and sense of self-sacrifice for the child. But underneath those layers, there are also there's a certain darkness as well, because it is a stage in a woman's life which is both desired and can also be despised. And I think socially we are also quite conditioned to think that the child is always the supreme being. But there are these layered emotions which we don't talk about, and we keep them hidden in the layers. This work is called Signs of Skin. So both these series of works, they were exhibited at various venues. Some Roots Grow Upwards and Signs of Skin were a part of Marvelous Reality in Delhi, which was curated by Sunil Mehra and was the 20th year anniversary celebration of Espas. It was also a part of India Awakens at the SL Museum in Vienna, and a part of Art Hong Kong as well. This body of work is called The Metamorphosing Female. Below you see a set of 4 canvases. They're pretty large scale, almost 4 feet by 7 feet each. And they're mixed media, so there's painting, there's silk screen, there's drawing. It's all of that coming together on each surface. On top you see details from a video installation called Hyperbloom Transitions. What I will be doing is to show you excerpts from the videos as well. So here again you have the image of, they're essentially self-portraits, but they've been photographed underwater. And again, the water body plays a very important role here in the work, because the female form is shown transforming, purging, emerging. And you can see ornamental and very evocative representations here of microphotographs and diagrammatic representations of single cell plants like protozoa from the water bodies and from oceans. So these microorganisms show very complex patterns of morphology and evolution and mutations. So for me, they become symbols of growth and evolution. This work is called The Sea Within. It's a part of the same series. And this is a large-scale diptych, almost 14 feet by 5 feet. So I think I started experimenting with photographically layering many images together. And these are stages which helped me make my first video piece, which was called Hyperbloom Transitions, also part of this body of work. This body of work was a part of 2 solos, one at Beckenegling International Fine Art in Dusseldorf and Munich, and a part of a solo project in Palette Art Gallery in Delhi in 2011 and 2012 respectively. And also this body of work was shown in Nature Mort in Berlin in a show curated by Diksha Nath. So I'll just show you an excerpt of this image. So I would say that these are early experiments with layered use of images. And you'll see how it sort of develops into the video works that you see in Scapelands. This is a set of works which was a part of a solo project at 10th Chancery Lane Gallery in Hong Kong in 2013. And this particular work, this triptych piece, is called The Embryonic Plant. Again, you have a layered digital archival pigment print with silk screen and drawing and acrylic and varnish on canvas. This is the detail from the painting. Another detail. Another work from the same series called Biomorphic Daydreams and Transitory Shows. This is the detail from the painting, which shows the archival pigment print with an overlayering of silkscreen, photographic silkscreen. By this time, I was beginning to do very large-scale silkscreen. I was preparing my own screens, and some of them were almost 5 feet by 6 feet in length. And essentially, at this stage, I was not editioning the work because I was doing works in mixed media, so I would take like a single impression and then just work with it. These are installed images from the show in Hong Kong. So each of these paintings is about 7 feet in height and about 12 to 14 feet. So this body of work was also a part of Sydney Contemporary in 2013 at Carriage Works in Sydney. This work is from a series called Biomorphic City, a self-sustained living ecopolis. It was a part of a show curated by Virangana Solanki in Delhi. So this particular work, I think it combines some of my interests in science fiction, particularly dystopian fiction, and some of my interest in futuristic architectural concepts. I was reading about new sort of innovations in the field of energy management and sustainabilities, and looking at scientists working with algae to make biodiesel for futuristic buildings. And essentially, this is a prototype of an imagined city where I've looked at futuristic architectural models. We've created this on 3D Max with V-Ray applications. And we've explored ideas that there could be bioreactors within these buildings which absorb the carbon dioxide emissions from outside, and they generate energy. There's an accompanying video with the painting, and these are stills from it, and I'd like to show you an excerpt. So I worked here with stills and dabbled a little into animation here.
Can you tell us what is animated? Sonia?
Oh.
Can you tell us what is animated?
The movements are animated, the female figures. Okay. So work from stills, a series of stills which we then have put together and animated here. Sorry. So this slide is basically to show you how the various layers work. I wanted to show you process images as well. So when I worked with layered images, I usually combine sometimes as many as 500 photographic images together, and then dissolve each layer into the other and eliminate areas from it and that's what gives me the final image. And it takes extremely long to render, sometimes days, but it's a wonderful process. This is another detail from another video. It's a video still from a video called Heterotropic Transitions. And here again, you can see that the central form is very womb-like. It's also, you know, it shows the muscular constrictions. The forms sort of merge into one another, and then, you know, they represent the workings of the inner body as well. Detail from the same video. Oh, this is great. Okay. Okay. Okay, so we now come to Scapelands, the new body of work that you see here. So Scapelands is essentially, there's two parts to Scapelands. One is the thematic content of it, and the other integral part is the process. It's also, for me, it's a sort of coming full circle, because it helped me to bring back strongly my interest in etching and aquatint, because of this body of work is a result of the Charles Wallace India Trust Award and Fellowship, which I received last year, and it facilitated a residency at the London Print Studio in the UK. I was able to push the boundaries of the medium by working on a really cutting-edge new medium called photopolymer gravure. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with the intricacies of this process. But what really interested me in photopolymer gravure is the fact that as a process itself, it brings together several other processes within it, like photography, like drawing, and essentially intaglio fine art printmaking, the process of etching and aquatint. And what it does is that it combines these mediums and it sort of pushes the medium further through an intense and meticulous scientific precision. The medium itself is quite laborious and meticulous, but it's worth it because of the kind of detail and exposures that you're able to achieve. It's really quite wonderful. So here's just to tell you a little bit about the process so you understand what goes into the making of a photopolymer plate. The top left slide shows a plate being kept on, on the vacuum belt of a UV light box. There's an aquatint screen on the top right, and that's preparing for the first stage of exposure. There's two qualities and 2 points that I would like to talk especially about. Photopolymer gravure replaces the traditional use of the resin in aquatint with this aquatint, really fine aquatint screen. So it's, that's one stage. Secondly, there's no use of any chemicals and there's no use of nitric acid. So it is largely organic and non-toxic. I really look forward to the time when this process arrives here. Right now, there have been some very initial level talks about importing some machines to the Gari Print Studios, but I think nothing has really materialized in the last 2 years. It would be amazing for printmakers here to use this new age technology. The plate is being exposed, the vacuum belt is turned around and the film is now, the exposures are set and the film is being, the plate is subjected to the UV radiation. On the left, I am preparing my, the acetate which has the artistic image on it. It's being readied by dusting it with chalk powder and it will go in for a second stage of exposure. Preparing for a second level of exposure. The top left shows the plate, the acetate being removed after the exposure has been done on the plate. At this stage, the image is not revealed to us. It's taken into the developing unit, and it is developed by sponging lightly under water. What happens here is that the unexposed polymers will begin to wash off. And you do a final level of wash under running tap water, and the image has started to reveal itself. The next stage is extremely important because at this point it's extremely important that every trace of water must be absorbed out of the surface of the plate. Otherwise, what happens is that you have watermarks that would print. So I'm doing that with a chamois, leather chamois with quick sharp dabs. The plate is being checked for any excess water. It is then taken to an industrial dryer and dried for about 15 to 20 minutes till it's touch dry. It is then exposed again in the UV light box, and this time it's an open exposure which will then harden the surface of the plate. So the golden yellow plate then appears to obtain a slightly bluish tint, a bluish green tint, and you know that the plate is hardened and is ready for printing. So this is a plate, a ready plate. The printing process is the same as the way you would print a regular zinc plate or an aluminum plate. So you use your archival pigment earth. I've used archival pigment earth pins. And that's how the printing has been done. That's the studio in London. And these are some of the presses that have been used to print the editions. This is the 1930s Rocha press, which I was extremely lucky to have been given the chance to use. One of the drawbacks of the process, I would say, is that it involves a whole lot of preliminary work. Especially in terms of making sure that you have your exposures correct, because you have only the one chance in exposing your plate to the ultraviolet radiation. So you have to do a number of test plates. You see the test plates on the left and the prints from the plate on the right with exposure, detailed exposures readings. These are works You've probably seen them downstairs as well, but just to show you the work in detail.
Can you tell us a bit more about the work itself?
Yeah, I'll do that. Coming to the content of Scapelands, Scapelands talks about the idea of the expedition as an artistic mode. It talks about traveling, it talks about documentation as an integral part of the artistic process. It brings together my interest in documenting various ecosystems. I think it's extremely important for us at this time to evaluate our place with and within nature. It tries to aim to create an ecological consciousness. So these are mangrove ecosystems in the Sundarbans in West Bengal, Pichavaram in Tamil Nadu, and other mangrove forests along the Cuddalore coast of Tamil Nadu and some parts of Kerala as well. Decadent Sublime. This is a photographic work made with 9 pieces, which basically talks about the role of the water hyacinth, otherwise quite an inconspicuous plant in this ecosystem. But during my visits to the ecosystem, I often came across these very fragile and ornamental looking plant bodies which traveled through the ecosystem. And as I traveled through, I suddenly found these extremely congested canals and creeks. And I was very intrigued to know more. And I found that there was a lot of mangrove decomposition and decay around the areas where these plant bodies had collected. So on researching more into these plants, one came to know that they are poisonous to this ecosystem. When they get together and they congest the ecosystem, they could destroy acres and acres of mangroves. So this work becomes relevant because it also highlights on the fragilities of these ecosystems. We look at mangrove systems essentially as very resilient systems, yet at the moment they are subject to, the landscape is in flux. For various reasons. I mean, mangroves are a system which is degrading faster and disappearing faster than any other ecosystem in the world. The plant itself is wonderful. I mean, I wouldn't even call them a plant. I would call them a system, actually, which sort of harbors various microsystems within it. I think this is one of the most beautiful qualities of the mangroves. They provide us with protection from tsunamis, from cyclones, and from hurricanes. But we have to understand the value of conserving these precious ecosystems. Details from Decadent Sublime. So this documents stages in the growth and the transformation of the water hyacinth. Various stages of growth and bloom. A mature stage as the plant moves. This is how they sort of collect together and then they make their way through the ecosystem. They're beginning to congest the canals and creeks here. This is an example of a congested canal. And gradually, the plants would have taken over acres and acres of mangrove forests if they are not physically removed. These are decaying water hyacinths. This brings me, are we showing the video? We're showing the video. Okay. So this brings me to another video work called Crater Fluids. These are stills from the video. I'll show you an excerpt from this video. Again, the word fluid comes back to me in my practice and in my imagery again and again. Fluid itself is, it's the water bodies which are both inside and outside. And here I'm particularly talking about amniotic environments, craters, fluids within our body structures. Details from crater fluids. Okay. Misha? So here we see landscapes which are essentially both real and imagined. This video piece was shown in Delhi in January. It's not a part of the show at Tark, but it's from the same series. It's called Habitat. Here again is the idea of looking at both macro and micro systems. Moving inwards.